I'm Daniel Tran, 34 molecular biologist and the youngest ever recipient of the Nobel Prize in chemistry. The hallway smelled the same lemon-scented polish over scuffed linoleum, and somewhere in the corner, a faint trace of instant coffee and mildew. I stood outside the main corridor of Jefferson High, beneath the flickering light that had always blinked above the trophy case. My palms were sweaty, not from nerves, but from the heat pressing against my blazer, the one I wore during my fellowship interviews. The reunion was just beginning, and the halls buzzed with laughter, hugs, and those hollow declarations of, "You haven't changed a bit." I hadn't RSVP'd. I didn't even intend to walk in. But I had received a message 2 weeks ago from Miss Lillian, my old science teacher. Her text was short. "They replaced your graduation photo. Thought you should know before the reunion." That was it. I stepped closer to the long wall of class portraits. My year 2008 had been sandwiched between the class of 2007 and the class of 2009, right under the gold plaque that read, "A Legacy of Leaders." My fingers trailed the glass, smudging it slightly as I counted the frames, one by one, until I reached the empty spot. In place of my portrait was an enlarged photo of Ethan Bishop Quarterback, valedictorian, and son of the then principal. A new plaque below read, "Student of the Decade." My stomach tensed. "Can I help you, sir?" A woman in a black Jefferson staff shirt approached, squinting at my face. I used to go here," I said, still staring at the wall. "Do you have a name tag? Or maybe you're here as a guest of someone." I turned slightly. "Daniel Tran." Her face remained neutral. She looked at her clipboard, flipped a page. "You're not on the list." I nodded once. "I didn't RSVP. Then I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside. Only confirmed guests." Her voice stopped as another woman approached, this one older, with sharp cheekbones, tight curls, and a cane that clicked authoritatively with each step. "Is there a problem here?" she asked. The staff member straightened. "This guest isn't on the list. Ms. Kensington." Ms. Kensington looked at me. Her eyes didn't waver. Then she tilted her head. "Daniel? Tran." "Yes." She took a step forward, placed her hand lightly on my shoulder, and turned to the now gathering onlookers alumni with drinks in hand, teachers peeking from the auditorium doors. "This," she said clearly, her voice ringing against the old tiles, "is the Nobel laureate you all conveniently forgot. The same Daniel Tran whose research is now used in over 30 nations to combat neurodegenerative diseases. The same student whose photograph was once here, until it was quietly removed." There was a pause, long, uncomfortable. Then she added, "And this is the award he brought with him tonight." She reached into the slim black case I had been holding and opened it, revealing the gleam of the Nobel medallion resting inside its blue velvet cradle. Gasps. Silence. Then a rustle, people adjusting, murmuring, turning. The atmosphere changed like a switch. Every face turned toward me, and I felt not pride, not revenge, just the weight of being seen. If you've ever walked into a room where your presence was unexpected or maybe even unwelcome, you know that silence, that tension. If you've ever been left out, replaced, or had your story rewritten by someone else's hand, tell me in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this moment feels familiar, even a little bit like, and subscribe. You're not alone in that feeling. Ms. Kensington closed the case gently, and then, without another word, she handed it back to me and pointed to the nail below the photo that had replaced mine. "Hang it there," she said. I looked up, saw the nail, saw Ethan Bishop's face smirking down from the golden frame. Then I stepped forward and hung the Nobel Prize beneath it. The hallway fell silent. Even the flickering light stopped blinking. The plaque clicked gently as it settled beneath the photo. A soft metallic sound, barely audible over the silence. I stepped back. Not for drama, but because I couldn't quite believe I had done it. My Nobel medal hung there like a challenge. Below Ethan's photo, the new student of the decade, the boy who got the glory, the mural, the stories. While I disappeared into the background of memory, footnotes, and silence, I turned to leave. That was the plan. Drop it off. Let them choke on it. Leave. But then I saw her, my mother, standing near the punch table with her hands nervously clutching her purse strap. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her black bob streaked with more gray, the same faded lipstick she always wore when she wanted to appear composed. Her eyes met mine, but she didn't smile. She gave the briefest nod, not invitation, not affection, just recognition, like I was a stranger returning a lost item. I walked toward her slowly, aware of the stares, the whispers trailing me like shadows. "You came," she said quietly. "They replaced the photo," I replied. My voice wasn't angry, just flat. Her eyes flicked past my shoulder to the wall. That wasn't my doing. No, I'm sure it wasn't. We stood there, two people who had once shared a house, a dinner table, a language. Now we couldn't share even 5 minutes without something cracking between us. "You're still bitter," she said finally. I blinked. "Do I seem bitter?" She adjusted her purse on her arm. "You're not the only one who lost things. You just had more words for it." I almost laughed, but the sound got caught in my throat. "I just wanted one thing," I said. "One photo. One square on the wall to say I mattered. You won a Nobel Prize." "Daniel, that's not enough. You never asked about it, never called. I found out you didn't even tell the neighbors." "I didn't understand it," she said. "What you do." "I still don't." Her honesty stung more than if she had lied. I glanced around. A small crowd was pretending not to watch us. The kind of people who smiled too wide when I walked past. Like remembering my name now was suddenly worth something. "Why did you come?" I asked. "Ms. Lillian called." She admitted. "Said you might be here. Said it might be good for us." I took a breath. Held it. Let it out slowly. Before I could speak again, a voice interrupted. "Daniel Tran." It was Mr. Bishop Ethan's father, former principal. Gray hair now, but still the same thick glasses and commanding presence. He approached with outstretched arms and a smile like a stage light. "I'll be damned," he boomed. "The genius returns." People around him chuckled. "Didn't expect to see you tonight. You know, we still use your story in our newsletter Science Fair to Nobel, the American dream." I stared at him. "You replaced my photo with your son's," I said. He blinked. The smile faltered. "Well, we wanted to represent multiple forms of excellence, athleticism, leadership, balance." He plagiarized his graduation speech. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. The air shifted. He stiffened. "That was never proven, because no one cared to look." "Daniel," my mother warned softly. I turned back to her. All I ever wanted was fairness. Just once. Mr. Bishop raised his chin. "Look, son, I'm not your son," I said. And that was it. The quiet around us thickened. But then I heard another voice. "Daniel Ms." Lillian stepped forward. She looked older too, but somehow unchanged. Kindness in her face, gentleness in her voice. "I'm so proud of you," she said. I felt the lump rising before I could swallow it down. "You're the reason I applied to MIT," I told her. "You're the reason I kept going." She smiled, eyes moist. I always knew you would do something extraordinary. That photo on the wall, it didn't do you justice anyway. And then, like some unseen dam had broken, people began to approach. First, a classmate, Michael Sato, who once borrowed my calculator and never returned it. "I saw your TED Talk," he said. "It made me cry." Then Olivia, the girl who used to mock my lunchbox in middle school. "I didn't know you went through so much," she said. "I'm sorry." More came. A cascade of delayed recognition, regret, admiration, shaky, awkward, but real. I wasn't sure how to hold it. Then someone tapped my shoulder, the reunion coordinator, a young alum with too much hair gel and a headset. "We'd love for you to say a few words," he said. "Before the slideshow. Just something small." 5 minutes, I hesitated. My mother looked at me. "Do it," she said. "You're here now." I nodded. The microphone felt heavier than expected as I stepped onto the small makeshift stage in the gym. The lights were too bright. The folding chairs half filled. My voice echoed. "Hi. I'm Daniel." I began. "I graduated in 2008. I used to walk these halls with my eyes on the floor and my lunch in my bag because it was easier than eating alone." Some people chuckled gently. I was never popular, never elected to anything. I didn't play sports. I spent most of my time in the science lab or in Miss Lillian's room after school. She smiled from the front row. There were days I thought none of this would matter. That working hard, being quiet, staying invisible, was a kind of curse. That if people didn't see you, they couldn't hurt you or help you. The room was still. I wasn't angry when I found out my photo was replaced. I was just tired of disappearing. So I came back tonight. Not for revenge, not even for recognition. I came to hang something on the wall. I gestured behind me, not a symbol of my achievement, but of all the kids who got overlooked, who didn't get their name called, who weren't voted. Most likely anything, who made it anyway. A beat, then a few claps, then more. I stepped down. My knees felt loose. My heart beat fast, but not from fear, from something else. Release, maybe. I made my way toward the back of the room where the coolers were kept, avoiding eye contact. That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder again. It was Ethan. I hadn't seen him all night. He looked good, married. I assumed he had a gold band. Same square jaw, same all-American confidence. But there was something different in his eyes now. Something less certain. "Hey," he said. I nodded. "You could have said something sooner," he said quietly. "About the speech. About the photo." I looked at him. "Would you have listened?" He didn't answer. "Instead," he said, "you were always smarter. I knew it. Everyone did. They just didn't want it to be true. I didn't need the apology, but it hung there between us like unfinished business." He extended his hand. I shook it. "Congrats." He said, "Really?" And then he walked away. The medal still hung on the wall, below his picture. A strange symmetry. For the first time in years. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just breath. The reunion ended slowly, like a candle burning down to the wick. Conversations thinned out into murmurs. Laughter faded into tired chuckles, and the last of the punch was being scraped out of the cooler with plastic cups. The DJ started packing up his small speaker system, and I found myself alone by the wall again, staring at the framed photo of Ethan Bishop, now absurdly decorated with a Nobel medal glinting below it like it belonged there all along. I reached up to retrieve the medal. "You sure you want to take it back?" "Miss." Lillian's voice came from behind me. Calm. Careful. I paused. My hand on the velvet case. No, I'm going to leave it. Just for tonight. She nodded and sat beside me on the bench along the wall. You know, when they took your photo down. I asked why. The principal said they needed to update the wall to reflect a broader legacy. That was code for politics. I gave a small smile. I figured. But it was more than that. You didn't come back. You didn't go to your tenure. No Facebook. No press. I thought disappearing was easier. Was it? I looked at the photo again. At first. Until it wasn't. She shifted, her cane resting against the bench. You always struck me as someone who wanted to be seen, but not touched. I breathed in. That sounds about right. A silence opened between us. Not uncomfortable, but aware. Waited. Why now, she asked. I looked at her. Because someone replaced me like I never existed. And I thought, if I don't claim my own story, someone else will. She patted my arm. I'm glad you did. I stayed a little longer after she left. Just walking. The gym, the courtyard. Even the science lab was unlocked. They used it as a quiet room now, for kids who needed breaks from class. I traced the chipped paint on the old doorframe and ran my fingers across the edge of the blacktop counters where I used to balance petri dishes and dreams. I left before midnight. No one stopped me this time. Not the staff. Not the silence. The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. Dozens of messages, screenshots, mentions. Daniel Tran was trending on local Twitter. A student had filmed my speech and posted it online. Within hours, it had made its way to alumni groups, academic forums, even a few small press outlets. One tweet read, "When you erase someone, be prepared for the day they show up with receipts and a Nobel." At first, I wanted to turn off my phone, but I didn't. I let it buzz. I let it ring. Because I was finally ready. 3 days later, I received a call from the Jefferson Library. A woman named Sylvia wanted to speak about the wall. I agreed to a meeting, mostly out of curiosity. The boardroom looked different than it used to. The fluorescent lights were brighter, the furniture upgraded, but the energy was the same formal smile, folded hands, and that vague scent of old paper and authority. We wanted to extend an apology, Sylvia began, for the decision to remove your photo. It was not our intention to diminish your accomplishments. I waited. No reaction. Just stillness. We're reinstating your portrait, she continued, with a plaque noting your Nobel Prize achievement, and we'd like to host a dedication ceremony. Press, parents, students. I raised an eyebrow. To clean up the mess. Her smile twitched. To celebrate our alumni. Properly. I glanced around the room at the other board members. Some nodded. Some avoided my gaze. I'll come, I said, on one condition, which is, I want Ms. Lillian to give the speech. Sylvia blinked. She's retired. Not irrelevant. They exchanged glances, then nodded. Fine, she said. We'll make the arrangements. The ceremony took place in late spring. The school made a production out of it: flowers, banners, even a small musical performance by the choir. I wore a simple navy suit. I didn't bring the medal. I didn't need to. Ms. Lillian stood on the small podium, her voice softer now, but still sharp where it mattered. Not all students shine at the right time, she said. Some glow quietly, away from the spotlight, until the world grows dark enough to see them. I watched from the front row, my mother beside me, hands folded tight in her lap. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short. I didn't come here to rewrite history, I said, only to reclaim a corner of it. Not for myself, but for every kid who's ever walked these halls with their head down, believing they'd never be seen. They applauded. Some cheered. I stepped down and took my seat again. Afterward, students came up to ask questions about science, about college, about failure. One girl asked me what it felt like to win. Terrifying, I said, and quiet. The world claps, then expects more. She nodded. That sounds lonely. I smiled. It doesn't have to be. You just have to remember who you are even when no one else does. My mother stood behind me then. I turned, unsure of what to expect. You spoke well, she said. Thanks. I didn't understand what you were chasing back then. I thought you were running from the family. I wasn't, I said. I was just trying to become someone I could live with. She nodded, slowly. I think I get that now. We stood in silence. The wall was behind us. Both portraits, Ethan's and mine, now hung side by side, equal in frame, equal in gold trim. A new plaque beneath mine read, Dr. Daniel Tran, Class of 2008, Nobel Laureate, 2023, Neuroscience for Humanity. The ones who disappear often build the world in silence. I hadn't written the quote. Ms. Lillian had. A week later, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter, written in fine black ink. Dear Daniel, I owe you an apology, not just for the photo, but for every time your voice was quieted in favor of someone louder. I see now how easy it was to reward charisma over substance. That was my failure as a leader. You deserved better. Sincerely, Mr. Bishop. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer with my college acceptance letters, old lab notebooks, and the photo, Ms. Mann. Lillian had returned to me the original class of 2008 graduation portrait. My face, shy and wide-eyed. Second row from the bottom. I looked young, too young to carry what I was already holding inside. Now, when people ask me about my proudest moment, I don't say the medal. I say it was walking back into the school where I had once felt erased, and being seen, fully, finally, not for what I had won, but for what I had always been. The press faded, as it always does. The headlines moved on, the retweets slowed, and eventually, I was just Daniel Tran again. Not the Nobel Prize winner, not the reunion speech, just a man with an apartment full of books and the soft hum of lab machines that still felt like family. I thought that would be the end of it, a chapter closed. But the truth is, once a door reopens, it doesn't always shut cleanly. One morning, 2 months after the ceremony, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple. Your father would have been proud. I clicked it. There was no body text, just a scanned photo, one I had never seen. My father standing in the old backyard, holding a young me on his shoulders. I must have been 5, maybe 6. We were both smiling, heads tilted to the same side. Behind us, a clothesline sagged under the weight of wet laundry, and the fence was half-painted, ordinary, but somehow holy. I stared at it for a long time. My father had passed when I was 19. A heart attack. Sudden. Brutal. No goodbyes. At the time, I had just started at MIT. I missed the funeral. The guilt had trailed me like a long shadow for years. The photo came with no signature, no sender's name, just a tiny watermark at the bottom corner, Waterside Archives. Glendale. Glendale was where we used to live. Before everything. I booked a flight the next day. The archive building sat beside a dry canal and a rusted playground. Inside, the air smelled like old glue and carpet dust. The receptionist, an older man with a thick mustache, looked up as I entered. You're the scientist, he said, not unkindly. We were expecting you. He handed me a folder tan. Weather-stained marked Tran Min, my father's name. How did this get here? I asked. Your mom dropped it off years ago, he replied. Said she didn't know what to do with it, but that maybe one day you'd come looking. I opened the folder slowly. Inside were dozens of photos, receipts, a pocket calendar from 1997, and several letters written in Vietnamese. One envelope had my name on it. I unfolded the paper with shaking hands. Contre quoi bas? If you're reading this, it means you've come back for something more than success. I was never good with words. Not in English, not even in Vietnamese. But I want you to know I saw you. Every late night, every time you stayed behind with your books, while the other kids laughed. I didn't always know how to help you, but I was proud. I was so proud. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer, but maybe one day, you'll read this and understand you were never invisible to me, but I sat there for a long time. The receptionist brought me tea without asking. I don't know if I thanked him. I was too lost in the ache of a love that had been there all along. Just quiet. I took the folder home with me, back in the city. I returned to the lab. Work was grounding rows of samples, the smell of ethanol and nitrile gloves, the low hum of centrifuges. My assistant, Marla, greeted me with her usual sarcasm. Famous Daniel returns, she said. Autographs at noon. I laughed, grateful for the normalcy. We were in the middle of a trial, a new synthetic compound showing promise in Alzheimer's regression. It was messy work, slow, but I liked the mess. It made me feel alive. One evening, while calibrating a machine, Marla glanced over. Your mom called earlier, she said. I froze. She called the front desk, left a message. I raised an eyebrow. You took a message from my mom. I'm a great assistant. I read the note. Just an address and a time. No explanation. It was a community center, small, 2-story, tucked between a laundromat and a pharmacy. Inside, kids laughed down the hallway, and a woman with a clipboard waved me toward room 6. I opened the door. My mother was standing at the front of a classroom, holding a whiteboard marker. A dozen high schoolers looked up at me. One had a sketchbook. Another wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big. She smiled. He's here. Here for what? She turned to me. This is your idea. I blinked. She explained after the dedication. She started volunteering. First just to help with attendance. Then mentoring. Then tutoring science classes when the teacher was out sick. Eventually, she started a program, the Invisible Kids Project, for students who felt forgotten, overlooked, dismissed. She used the phrase from my speech. I looked around the room. One girl raised her hand. Are you the guy from the Nobel thing? I nodded. Cool, she said, then went back to her notebook. My mother handed me the marker. They want a guest speaker. I hesitated, then stepped forward. Okay, I said. Let's talk about atoms. The students groaned in unison. I laughed. For the first time in years, it felt easy. That became routine. Every other Thursday, I'd come in for an hour. We rarely talked about science. Mostly we talked about resilience, about how you can grow in silence and still bloom, about how the world sometimes pretends not to notice you. But you have to show up anyway. Some kids listened, some rolled their eyes, but a few stayed after. One boy, Jamal, always hung back. One day, he asked, "Did you ever think about quitting all the time? So why didn't you?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Because I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't." He nodded. That's a good answer. One day, a package arrived at the lab. No return address. Inside was a frame, a photo of my Nobel speech, a still taken mid-sentence, hand raised, face caught between vulnerability and fire. Beneath it, someone had engraved the quote, "If you erase me, Be ready for the day I return holding the truth. It wasn't my quote, but it was close enough. I hung it on the wall of the lab, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. I don't visit the high school often anymore. Life gets in the way. Grants, travel, deadlines. But sometimes, when I drive by Jefferson High on my way home, I see the wall through the window, 2 frames side by side, mine and Ethan's. I don't feel bitterness anymore, just distance, like watching an old film in a language you once knew. My mother and I still speak, though not often, but when we do, it's real. We talk about books, about the students, about my father's letters. Sometimes she cries, sometimes I let her. And sometimes we sit in silence, both knowing the shape of the love we couldn't say back then but can live now. Once, I asked Ms. Lillian why she'd kept the photo. She said, "Because I knew the world would forget you before you were ready to be remembered." She was right, but not anymore. Now I walk freely. Now the silence isn't empty. Now the wall doesn't just hold photos. It holds memory. It holds return. It holds me. Summer rolled in with its familiar Haze City heat rising from the sidewalks, buses groaning through intersections, and children's voices echoing from parks long after sunset. I found myself drawn to the ordinary things again. My routines sharpened: early coffee, lab by 7 a.m., lectures in the afternoon, late dinners alone. But the silence had changed. It didn't weigh as much anymore. I didn't think I would hear from Ethan Bishop again. And yet, one day, there he was, sitting in the front row of one of my public lectures at the university. No entourage, no press, just a clean white shirt, a worn notebook in his lap, and that same square jaw from high school, a little softened now. He waited until the crowd dispersed, then approached slowly, his hand extended. "You said you didn't want revenge," he began, "but you got it anyway." I shook his hand but didn't answer. "I watched that video," he said, over and over, "the way people looked at you, like they'd never seen you before." "They hadn't," I replied. He nodded, looking down at his shoes. "I was never half the man people believed I was." "You don't have to tell me that." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I guess not." There was a pause. Not tense, just unsure. "Why are you here?" "Ethan." He shrugged. "Because it felt wrong. Leaving it like that. You hung your Nobel under my photo. That burned." I tilted my head. "Good. But it also opened something. I've been coaching kids. At the school. Trying to do it right this time." I raised an eyebrow. "You want forgiveness?" "No," he said quickly. "Not anymore. Just clarity." Clarity. That word stayed with me. I didn't promise him anything. Didn't give him some grand benediction. We shook hands again, and he left. But something shifted inside me. The rivalry that had been carved into my teenage years, the invisible competition, the weight of being second best in everyone else's story, it didn't feel real anymore. It felt like a ghost, and I was no longer haunted. Later that month, Ms. Lillian called me with an idea. "They're opening a new wing at Jefferson," she said. "A science center. They want to name it after you." I exhaled. Is that supposed to mean something to me? Maybe not. But it might mean something to someone else. I thought about the kids I met in room 6, the way they looked at me not like a symbol, but like proof. I thought about Jamal and his questions, about the quiet girl with the sketchbook who never said a word but drew diagrams of molecules with butterfly wings. "They can use the name," I said, "but on one condition. Another one, I want a room named after Ms. Lillian." She laughed. "That's unnecessary. It's non-negotiable." She paused. "You're still stubborn. Better than being silent." The Daniel Tran Science Center opened that fall. I didn't go to the ribbon cutting, but I did visit a week later, unannounced, wearing jeans and a hoodie and sunglasses I didn't need. The walls were white, the furniture sleek, the floors still smelled of varnish. On the second level, just above the robotics lab, there was a small glass door with frosted lettering, the Lillian Wong Research Room for the quiet kids who change everything. I stood there longer than I expected to. No one noticed me. I liked it that way. That same week, I got another letter in the mail. This one from Marla. She'd been accepted into a PhD program across the country, wanted to thank me, said she'd never have applied if I hadn't pushed her. "You made being invisible feel like a superpower," she wrote, "and then, you taught me how to be seen." I sat with the letter for a while, then typed back a short reply. "You were always visible. You just needed a mirror. Life didn't change dramatically after all that. It just got quieter, more rooted." I started teaching again, not just grad students, but high schoolers too. I taught one class a semester at Jefferson, by choice. One small room, 10 kids, no grades. We called it the Lab for the Unseen. There was no syllabus, just questions, and time. Some of them hated it at first, but then something happened. They started bringing in their own ideas. One girl came in with a broken microscope and fixed it in front of us without saying a word. One boy wrote an entire speech about failure and read it aloud while shaking like a leaf. I just listened. Sometimes, that was enough. One evening after class, as I was packing up, I found a note left on my desk. No name, just handwriting that sloped upward, sharp at the edges. They took my name off the awards list because my GPA dropped. But this class makes me feel like I still exist. Thank you. I folded the note and tucked it into the pocket of my coat. I didn't need to know who wrote it. I already understood. My mother came to visit that winter. We didn't plan it. She just called one morning and said, "I want to see where you work now." So I took her. She wore a wool scarf and carried a bag of cut fruit in Tupperware. Always the caretaker. Even when she didn't know how. We walked through the science center, through the lab, through the classroom. When we got to the plaque, she stopped. She traced the letters of my name with her fingers, like she was reading Braille. "You were so small when we came to this country," she whispered. "I didn't know what to do with you." I looked at her, surprised. "I thought if I kept you quiet, maybe you'd be safe." And now she turned to me. "I know you weren't meant to be safe. We didn't hug. That wasn't our way." But she pressed the bag of fruit into my hands and said, "Eat something. You're too thin." I smiled. Now, when people ask about the medal, I keep it in a drawer, not hidden, just resting. It's not the point anymore. The real prize is this. The girl who finally speaks. The boy who finally asks. The teacher who never stopped believing. The mother who begins to understand. And the version of myself who walked into a school that once erased him and left a piece of himself behind. Not to prove anything, but to leave the door open for whoever came next. I still pass that wall sometimes. The photos remain. Ethan's smile, my quiet stare. But they don't matter the way they used to, because the wall isn't about recognition anymore. It's about return. It's about memory. It's about making space where there once was none. And every time I see a student pause at my plaque, I know I'm not just hanging on that wall. I'm standing behind them. The final snow that year fell quietly, without wind, without warning. I was walking home from campus, coat open, head bare, not expecting the sudden softness from the sky. It dusted my shoulders, filled the folds of my sleeves, clung to the back of my neck like a whispered reminder. I stopped under a street lamp and looked up. The flakes moved like slow ghosts, drifting between orange light and the dark above. It reminded me of childhood winters, of the old apartment with the cracked heater, of sitting by the window with a book in my lap while my father silently mended something with his hands. We were both there, both present, and yet neither of us had the language to speak what mattered. Back then, I thought being seen meant speaking louder. Now I know it means letting someone listen long enough to hear what you never say. At the door of my apartment, I found a package, brown paper, no return address. Inside was a small wooden frame, carefully carved. It held a photograph I had never seen, a candid from the ceremony months ago. I was laughing, genuinely laughing, with my head slightly tilted back and my hand pressed to my chest. My mother stood next to me, not smiling but watching me with an expression that was neither pride nor confusion, but something more intimate: recognition. Who sent it, I had no idea. Maybe a student, maybe Ms. Lillian, maybe the universe had learned to send me what I didn't know I needed. I hung it above my desk. Spring came with a new energy. The Science Center opened more courses, expanded into community outreach, and I was asked to advise a group of senior students on a capstone project. The topic: Invisible Impact, Quiet Innovators in Science. They interviewed custodians who fixed early lab tools, assistants who ghostwrote grants, graduate students whose names never made it to publication. They uncovered stories that were humbler than mine, but no less important. One girl wrote, "We always thought heroes made noise. Turns out, some were just too busy working." They asked me to write the foreword for their report. I did. There are those who walk into rooms and claim the air, and there are those who build the walls that hold the room up in the first place. Both are vital, but only one is usually remembered. This report is about the others. By summer, I began mentoring a boy named Elijah. He was 14, small for his age, with thick glasses and a habit of mumbling his answers. At first, he barely looked me in the eye, but over time, he began to stay behind after class. One day, he asked, "Do you think people can change who they are?" I paused. "Why do you ask?" "Because I hate being like this," he whispered. Quiet, scared. "I want to be someone else." I sat with him. "Elijah," I said gently, "you don't need to become someone else. You just need to stop apologizing for who you already are." His eyes filled with tears. He wiped them quickly, and I saw myself in him so clearly it stunned me. The years passed gently after that, not without pain. Research setbacks, grants denied, relationships that didn't last, but I carried them differently. I no longer needed to be the one who proved anything. I had already done the only thing that mattered. I stayed. One autumn morning, I received an invitation, the Royal Society asking if I would deliver their annual keynote. The letter was formal, embossed, perfumed with reverence. I didn't hesitate, but I didn't write the kind of speech they expected. Instead, I spoke about failure. I spoke about loneliness. I spoke about the pain of brilliance in a room that prefers charm. I spoke about the kind of genius that grows in the dark like roots, not like flowers. And when I finished, the room didn't erupt. It stood, silent, then steady, then louder. Afterward, an elderly physicist came up to me and said, "I spent my entire life trying to be seen. Today I realized I already had been by the wrong people." I nodded, because I knew exactly what he meant. I visited the archive in Glendale again a year later. I hadn't told anyone. I just wanted to sit in that same dusty chair and reread my father's letter. But when I arrived, the man at the desk handed me a second folder. "Found this last month?" he said. "In storage. It's yours." Inside were my early essays, Ones I had written for college. Ones I had forgotten even existed. Attached to one was a note in my mother's handwriting. He stays up so late. Maybe these will matter someday. My throat tightened. She had kept them. She had believed, even when she hadn't understood. It's a strange thing to discover your own myth from the outside, to see how others remember you, not as you were, but as they needed you to be. But I didn't resent it anymore. I just folded the pages gently and placed them in my bag. Ms. Lillian passed away 3 winters later. The school held a memorial. Every student she'd ever helped, every quiet kid, every late bloomer, every invisible child came. The room was too full for the chairs. People stood in the halls, listened through open doors. I was asked to speak. I didn't prepare notes. She didn't change me, I said. She didn't fix me. She didn't make me brave. She just never left. That was enough. We planted a tree outside the research room, a weeping cherry blossom. Quiet in spring, but unforgettable once it bloomed. I'm older now. Not old, but older. The world moves faster than I do now. New minds, new theories, new voices, and I welcome it. I no longer need to be the first in the room. I just want to be near enough to hear what they're discovering. And when I walk through the halls of Jefferson High, now adorned with digital displays and bright murals, I see my face less and less. That's okay. What matters is this. A boy once invisible stood in a place that tried to forget him, and left behind more than a name. He left a mirror, for others to find themselves. The Nobel medal, still in that drawer, the plaque on the wall, still gleaming. But the real prize? It's in the stories students tell now. It's in the classroom that once erased me, now bearing my name. It's in every soft voice that dares to speak anyway, and in every teacher who stays not for glory, but for the moment a student finally looks up. I once thought recognition would make me whole, but I was wrong. What made me whole was the day I didn't need it anymore, and still chose to stay.